Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The lavish auction hall in the heart of Dubai buzzed with energy. Glittering chandeliers cast soft light over the polished marble floors, and the air was filled with the scent of expensive cologne and freshly printed programs. Guests, many of them rich beyond imagination, whispered eagerly among themselves as the auction began. A sense of anticipation lingered in the room, the kind that accompanies an event so rare, so extraordinary, it becomes a spectacle in itself. Today's auction was different. It wasn't a collection of priceless art or rare antiques being sold. No, this auction was something altogether more unusual, more controversial. A human life, not figuratively, but literally. The auctioneer, a tall, well-dressed man with a sharp gaze, stood at the center of the stage, his eyes scanning the crowd. His voice echoed across the hall, confident and practiced, as he spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, what you see before you today is unlike anything that has ever been presented at this venue before. This auction, this bidding, is for a chance to fulfill a dream. A dream of motherhood, of family. You have the opportunity to take control of this new life, to make a difference, to change everything. The crowd stilled for a moment, intrigued and somewhat uneasy. The words, control and change, hung in the air, charged with a strange energy. Whispers rippled through the room. At the center of this spectacle stood her, Layla, a woman in her 30s, fragile and delicate-looking, yet with eyes that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories. She stood straight, her hands folded nervously in front of her. Her dark hair cascaded down her shoulders, and her pale skin seemed almost luminous under the lights. Dressed in a simple, modest black dress, she looked like any woman you might pass on the street. But today, she was being sold to the highest bidder, a reality that seemed impossible to anyone who didn't know her backstory. Layla had been through hell and back. She wasn't here by choice, not exactly. It was desperation that had led her to this point. She had no family left, no support. After a failed marriage, an unwanted pregnancy, and years of struggling to survive in a world that offered her nothing, she had agreed to do what she never thought she would. She was here today, on this stage, in this auction house, because someone had promised her that if she gave up her rights to her life for a chance to have a child, everything would change. This was her final resort, a way to give her son, her only hope, a future. The auctioneer's voice broke through her thoughts. Bidding starts at $10 million, gentlemen. This is the opportunity to be a father, to give life to a child, a chance that very few can afford. Let the bidding begin. A man in a tailored suit at the front of the room immediately raised his paddle. His name was Khalid Al-Farid, a billionaire known for his business empire and his power across the Middle East. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a look of absolute control in his deep-set eyes, he had been watching Layla from the moment she stepped onto the stage. To him, this wasn't just about a child, it was about gaining what he could never have, a family. Layla's heart raced as the auction continued. Each paddle raise made her stomach churn. 10 million. 15 million. The numbers climbed quickly, but it was clear that Khalid was determined to win. He watched her, his eyes never leaving her figure, his face cold, calculating. Another bidder, a younger man with a slick smile and a reputation for fast deals, raised his paddle again. 20 million, he called, his voice ringing out across the hall. Khalid's eyes narrowed. The bidding war intensified. 25 million. 30 million. Layla's world felt like it was spinning out of control. She hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated just how far people were willing to go for what she was offering. Her desperation had led her here, but now that she was on the stage, surrounded by wealth and power, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had become part of a dangerous game. The tension was palpable. The air itself seemed to thicken with each new bid, each new number that flashed before her eyes. She could feel her palms sweating, her body trembling, and a voice inside her screamed to run, to escape, to never have come here at all. But then she saw him, Khalid, still watching her, his expression unchanged. The man who had promised her that this would be the key to her salvation. Then, the voice of the auctioneer boomed through the hall, cutting through her thoughts. 35 million, going once, going twice. A dramatic pause. The auctioneer's voice dropped lower, and Layla's heart seemed to stop. Sold. The hammer fell with a sharp crack. To Mr. Khalid Al-Farid. The crowd erupted in applause, but Layla barely heard it. The room spun around her. She had sold herself, her body, her future, for money, for a chance to have a child. But now, the weight of what she had done hit her all at once. Khalid stood, a man of action, his eyes never leaving her as he made his way toward the stage. He walked with the confidence of a man who knew he had just won something that no one else could claim. He stepped forward, and for the first time, his gaze softened slightly. He offered a hand to Layla, not in the way one might extend a greeting, but as though he were reaching for something more, something that would bind them both forever. Congratulations, Khalid said, his voice deep and commanding. Your life is about to change. I'm giving you everything you've ever dreamed of. Layla hesitated for a moment before taking his hand. The grip was firm, cold, and without warmth, yet there was something else there, something she couldn't quite place. I'll do whatever it takes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He nodded, his eyes now scanning her face as if searching for something hidden, something only he could understand. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but Layla didn't notice. She was too lost in the whirlwind of emotions and the unknown future that lay ahead. She had made a deal with the devil, and now she had to live with it. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that this auction was only the beginning. The discovery that awaited them both would change everything. It would uncover secrets neither of them had expected, secrets so powerful they could destroy the very foundation of everything they had built. And as the lights dimmed and the final guests left the auction house, Layla felt an overwhelming sense of dread. She had no idea what she had just signed up for. But soon, the truth would find its way to the surface, and it would shatter the world she thought she knew. Khalid Al-Farid had been accustomed to getting what he wanted. His wealth, power, and influence were unmatched in the business world. He could buy anything, a private island, a luxury yacht, a mansion in the most exclusive parts of the world. But what he had just acquired in that auction was something far more complicated. It wasn't just a woman, a mother with a desperate past. No, it was a promise, a future, a life that was inextricably tied to his own now. And while the world saw him as a man who had achieved everything, he knew, deep down, that something was about to change in a way he couldn't predict. As Layla followed him out of the auction hall, she couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in on her. Her hand trembled as she clutched her purse, her head swimming with the enormity of what had just happened. She had sold herself, her life, to this powerful man, and yet it felt as if she were walking into an abyss. Her son, the only reason she had agreed to this, still lingered in her mind. How could she look him in the eyes after everything? How could she explain this to him? Khalid led her to a sleek black SUV parked outside, the polished chrome reflecting the fading sun. A bodyguard opened the door, and Layla stepped inside, her heart thumping in her chest. Khalid followed her, sitting across from her with an air of silent authority. The doors shut behind them with a heavy, final sound. The drive through the city was long and quiet. Layla sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, staring out of the window as the city's skyline blurred past her. The lights of Dubai twinkled in the distance, like stars in a cold, unfeeling sky. She couldn't help but feel the weight of her decision bearing down on her. She had agreed to this, yes. But now that it was happening, now that she was actually in this car with Khalid, the man who had bought her, she began to wonder if it was all a mistake. Khalid, on the other hand, sat in silence. His thoughts far away. He was a man used to control, and this entire situation felt strangely out of his hands. He hadn't expected to feel this unsettled by the deal. He was a businessman. He had bought and sold companies, art, and land. But a person? This wasn't business as usual. Layla wasn't just a commodity. She was a real woman with a past, with feelings, with a story. And there was something in her eyes that unsettled him, something that made him question his decision. But he didn't let it show. His expression remained stoic, his jaw tight as he glanced at her from time to time. Finally, the car came to a stop. The silence between them was thick, as if the weight of what had just transpired had yet to be fully understood by either of them. The bodyguard opened the door, and Khalid stepped out, offering his hand to Layla. She hesitated for a moment before accepting, the chill of his touch sending a shiver through her spine. Together, they entered the building before them. A towering, sleek glass skyscraper that stretched high into the night sky. "This will be your home," Khalid said, his voice low but carrying authority. "For as long as you need." Layla glanced up at the building, her stomach sinking. She had imagined many things about this moment, but none of them had included stepping into a world so foreign to her, a world of glass and steel, of luxury beyond measure. As she walked through the grand entrance, she was struck by the contrast between her reality and the one she had just entered. The lobby was marble, glimmering in the soft light of the chandeliers above. The air smelled of rich leather and polished wood. Layla felt small, out of place. This wasn't her world. She had spent years scraping by, living in cramped apartments, barely able to provide for her son. And now, she was stepping into the mansion of a man who could own the entire city. Khalid led her through the hallways, his presence imposing, his steps deliberate and confident. They came to a voice barely above a whisper. Khalid's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Your role here is not just to be a mother to the child. You must understand that this is a partnership, a mutual arrangement. There will be times when you must do things that are difficult. Things that may not make sense to you at first. But you will obey. Do you understand?" Layla's breath caught in her throat. The weight of his words settled like a stone in her chest. What did he mean? What would he ask of her? She had already given so much, but would she be asked to give more than she had ever imagined? And what would happen if she refused? "I understand," she said, though the words felt hollow. Khalid nodded. "Good. You will find that I am a man of my word. But remember, this is not just about you. This is about creating a future, a legacy." As he spoke, Layla felt a strange, inexplicable sense of unease crawl up her spine. There was something in his tone, something in the way he held himself, that sent a warning signal to her brain. She had no idea what she was about to be a part of, but she was already in too deep. The night stretched on, and Layla lay in the large, luxurious bed that had been provided for her, unable to sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts of her son, of the promises Khalid had made, of the conditions she had agreed to. She couldn't escape the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that the life she had just walked into wasn't as simple as it appeared. As she tossed and turned, a noise in the distance caught her attention, a low hum, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It was coming from somewhere deep within the building. For a moment, Layla wondered if she was just imagining things, but then the sound grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't just the hum of the building, it was something else, something mechanical. She got out of bed, drawn toward the source of the noise. Quietly, she opened the door to her room and stepped into the hallway. The sound seemed to be coming from below, from somewhere in the bowels of the building. Intrigued, and perhaps driven by a need to uncover the truth of her new surroundings, Layla moved silently down the corridor toward the elevator. She pressed the button, and the doors slid open with a soft whoosh. The elevator descended, slowly, as she watched the numbers drop, each one bringing her closer to the unknown. What was Khalid hiding? And why had he insisted on such secrecy? When the elevator stopped, the doors opened to a dark, empty hallway. The hum was louder now, vibrating in the walls. Layla stepped out, unsure of what she would find, but compelled by the need to know. She followed the sound, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the hallway. She reached a door at the end of the hall, its heavy steel frame marking it as something far different from the rest of the building. Layla hesitated, her hand on the cold metal handle. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Something told her that this was where the real mystery lay, where everything would begin to unravel. With a deep breath, she turned the handle and opened the door. Layla stepped into the darkened room, her breath shallow, heart racing in her chest. The hum that had been echoing throughout the building grew louder now, almost vibrating the floor beneath her feet. The air was cold, stale, and smelled faintly of something metallic. She paused for a moment, unsure whether to continue further, but the inexplicable pull of curiosity pushed her forward. She had to know. Whatever Khalid was hiding, whatever lay behind this door, was the key to understanding her new life, and perhaps, to unlocking the mystery of her future. The door creaked shut behind her with an unsettling sound, and she found herself in a dimly lit hallway, stretching into darkness. The walls were made of bare concrete, a stark contrast to the luxurious surroundings of the upper floors. It felt like she had entered another world entirely, one that was cold, sterile, and unsettlingly unfamiliar. The hum continued, coming from somewhere deeper within the building. She moved cautiously down the corridor, the sound of her footsteps the only thing breaking the silence. The hallway seemed endless, stretching far beyond the confines of the apartment building above. The floor was concrete, rough and uneven beneath her feet, and the walls were bare save for the occasional flickering light above her. There were no windows, no signs of life. Just darkness and the persistent hum, which seemed to grow louder the further she walked. As she moved deeper into the corridor, the temperature seemed to drop. The air grew thicker, heavier, as if something unseen was pressing down on her. Layla felt a shiver run down her spine, but she pressed on. Her mind raced with questions. What was Khalid hiding down here? Why had he been so secretive about this part of the building? What was so important that he had to keep it hidden from her? The corridor twisted and turned, and Layla's nerves grew sharper. She had the overwhelming sense that she was being watched, though she could see no one. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She had felt a strange tension when Khalid had spoken earlier, a warning, but she had brushed it aside. Now, everything seemed to fall into place. There was something here, something dangerous, something that could change everything. At last, she reached the end of the hall. A heavy, steel door stood in front of her, locked and sealed tight. But this door was different. Unlike the others in the building, it didn't have a handle, nor did it seem to have any kind of traditional locking mechanism. There was only a keypad, with a small screen next to it. The screen blinked red, indicating that it was inactive. Layla stood frozen in front of the door, her breath fogging the cold air in front of her. She stared at the keypad, wondering what it was for. Her fingers itched to press the buttons, but she resisted. What if someone saw her? What if this was a trap? Her mind raced, torn between the impulse to uncover the truth and the fear of the consequences. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, startled, her heart pounding in her chest. Khalid stood at the far end of the hallway, watching her with an unreadable expression. He had followed her, though she hadn't heard his approach. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, she saw something other than the cold, calculating gaze that usually accompanied his presence. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low, calm, and dangerous. Layla felt a rush of fear flood her chest, but she refused to back down. She had come this far, there was no turning back now. "I heard something," she said, her voice trembling. "I wanted to see what it was." Khalid's lips twitched into a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. You shouldn't be here, he said. There are things in this building that are not meant for your eyes. Layla felt a chill run down her spine as his words sank in. What is behind this door, Khalid? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you hiding? For a long moment, Khalid didn't respond. He stood there, watching her with an unreadable expression, his eyes dark and intense. Then, with a slight sigh, he stepped forward, walking slowly toward her. She backed up instinctively, her body tense, ready for whatever he might do. This place, he began, his voice quieter now, was never meant to be seen. It's a part of my life that you don't need to know. But you're already involved, aren't you? You want to know the truth. Layla nodded slowly, her heart thudding in her chest. I do, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I need to know. Khalid stopped in front of the door, his hand resting briefly on the keypad. I was hoping you wouldn't ask, he said, his voice grim. He pressed a sequence of numbers on the keypad, and the red light on the screen changed to green. The door clicked open with a soft hiss, revealing what lay beyond. Layla's breath caught in her throat as the door slowly swung open, revealing a vast, cavernous room. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, not the sterile, cold room she had expected, but something far darker, more ominous. The walls were lined with rows upon rows of monitors, flickering with static. There were machines, tubes, and equipment that she didn't recognize, all connected by a complex web of wires and cables. In the center of the room stood a large, glass chamber, a cylindrical structure that looked almost like a coffin. Inside, there was a faint glow, a strange, pulsing light that seemed to come from nowhere. Layla's eyes widened as she took in the scene before her. The air in the room felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the very atmosphere was charged with a sense of unease. What is this place? Layla asked, her voice barely a whisper. Khalid's expression hardened as he stepped into the room, moving toward the chamber. This is the heart of everything, he said, his voice cold and emotionless. This is where it all began. Layla followed him, her mind racing. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaking with confusion. What is this place? What have you done? Khalid turned to face her, his dark eyes full of something she couldn't quite place. You don't understand yet, Layla. But you will. This is the future of humanity, of survival. It's a secret I've been protecting for years. As he spoke, Layla's eyes were drawn to the glowing chamber at the center of the room. The light inside it pulsed rhythmically, as though it had a life of its own. She couldn't tear her gaze away. There was something eerie about it, something that unsettled her deep in her core. Khalid moved toward the chamber, pressing a button on the wall next to it. The glass door to the chamber slid open, and Layla felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she saw what was inside. At first, she couldn't believe her eyes. Inside the chamber lay a figure, a child, no more than 5 or 6 years old, lying motionless in the glass tank. The child's skin was pale, almost translucent, and there were tubes connected to their body, monitoring devices attached to their small frame. The child's chest rose and fell faintly, but it was clear that they were not truly alive, not in the way that Layla understood life. This is the reason I've been collecting women like you, Khalid said quietly, his voice almost reverent. This child, Layla, is part of a project. A project to create the perfect human being, a child who can survive in a world that is no longer fit for humanity. Layla took a step back, her mind reeling. You're experimenting on children? She whispered, horrified. Khalid's gaze was unwavering. No, he said, his voice cold. I'm saving them. This child is the result of years of research, of genetic engineering. This is the future, Layla. The future of our species. The child you saw in the auction was merely a means to an end. Layla's head spun as the full weight of his words hit her. She had been part of a scheme, a plan to create something, someone, that was far more than just a child. She had thought that she was helping him fulfill a dream of fatherhood, but this was no dream. It was a nightmare. And now, Layla realized, she was inextricably linked to it all. What had she gotten herself into? Layla stood frozen, her heart thudding loudly in her chest. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the child in the glass chamber. It felt like the room was spinning around her, like the ground beneath her was slipping away. The truth, which she had never fully understood until this moment, now crashed down on her in waves. She had thought this would be the answer, a way to secure her future and provide for her son. But now, everything she had believed in seemed to unravel before her eyes. Khalid stood by her side, watching her closely, his eyes intense and unreadable. He had revealed the heart of his plans, and now there was no going back. Layla's mind raced, a whirlwind of thoughts, confusion, and fear. She had never imagined something like this. She had been so focused on survival, on finding a way out of the hell that was her life, that she hadn't stopped to consider the dark undercurrents that ran beneath Khalid's polished exterior. The child, Layla whispered, her voice trembling. She couldn't take her eyes off the small, motionless figure inside the glass chamber. The pale skin, the tubes, the monitors, it was as if the child were trapped between life and death, caught in some cruel experiment. What are you doing to them? Khalid's expression didn't change. His gaze was unwavering, cold as steel. This child, Layla, is part of a larger plan. A project to build a future where humanity can survive, even in the harshest conditions. The world is changing, deteriorating. Our planet is becoming uninhabitable. But I'm creating a new generation of people who can survive in the worst environments. He paused, allowing his words to sink in, watching Layla carefully. She felt sick, as if the very air in the room had turned toxic. This was no longer about having a family. This wasn't about providing a better life for anyone. It was about creating something unnatural. Genetic engineering, Khalid continued, his voice low, almost reverent. I've been working on this for years. I've gathered women, mothers like you, who have the right genetic material, the right potential to give birth to children who can withstand the future. I'm building a race of people who can survive the unthinkable. And you, Layla, are a key part of this. Layla took a step back, her legs unsteady beneath her. It was like everything she had known had been ripped away, exposing the horrifying reality of the situation. She had been nothing more than a vessel, a pawn in Khalid's twisted game. The idea of motherhood, of giving her son a better life, had been used against her. She had been promised a future, but it wasn't the future she had imagined. You're using me, she said, her voice rising with a mixture of anger and disbelief. You used me. All of us. We're just tools to you. You don't care about families. You care about creating your own version of humanity. Khalid didn't flinch. He simply nodded, as if he had expected her to come to this realization. I care about survival, he said, his tone devoid of any emotion. What I'm doing is necessary. The world is collapsing, Layla. I'm doing what's needed to ensure that humanity has a future. It's not about morality. It's about survival. And I will do whatever it takes. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Khalid wasn't interested in redemption or forgiveness. He was determined, driven by a singular vision, a vision that Layla could no longer see the way he did. She had entered this world thinking she was helping a man who wanted to be a father. But now, she saw the truth. She had been nothing more than a cog in his machine. Her mind swirled with thoughts of her son, of the future she had promised him. She had come here to escape, to find something better, something safer for him. But now, she realized that she had walked straight into the heart of darkness. What had she done? Khalid seemed to sense her turmoil. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. I understand your anger, Layla, he said, his voice softer now, though still calculating. But you have to understand that this is bigger than you. Bigger than all of us. You're part of something much greater. You have a chance to shape the future. You can't back out now. Layla shook her head, her mind a storm of confusion and dread. She couldn't understand how he could be so detached, so cold. She had always thought there was a man behind the mask, someone who cared, someone who had a heart. But now, she saw him for what he truly was, a man driven by ambition, willing to sacrifice everything, including innocent lives, for his vision of the future. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. I won't be part of this. I won't let you use me like this. I can't. Khalid's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a thin smile. You don't have a choice, he said softly. You're already involved. You can't leave. Not now. For the first time, Layla saw a glimmer of something dark in his eyes. The coldness, the absolute certainty in his voice, it sent a shiver down her spine. He wasn't just a businessman or a philanthropist. He was a man with a singular purpose, and nothing, not even her resistance, would stand in his way. Layla's pulse raced as she looked at him. She had been drawn into his world by desperation, by the promise of a better life. But now, she understood the true cost of that promise. There was no way out. She was trapped. The silence between them grew heavy, thick with the weight of everything that had been said. Layla could feel the walls closing in, the air becoming stifling. She wanted to scream, to run, to escape from this nightmare. But where would she go? What could she do? She turned back to the glass chamber, her gaze fixed on the child inside. The faint glow seemed to mock her, the child's pale face a symbol of the twisted future Khalid was trying to create. This wasn't survival. This was manipulation. This was control. And it was too late for her to turn back. But there was still one thing she could do. One thing she hadn't considered until now. She could fight. She could resist. She could refuse to be a part of Khalid's sick plan, no matter the cost. She had to find a way to protect her son, to protect herself. Khalid was right about one thing, she was involved. But she wasn't going to be his pawn. Not anymore. The air in the darkened room felt heavy, almost suffocating, as Layla stood motionless, trying to process everything that had just been revealed. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her body shaking with a mixture of fear, anger, and disbelief. Khalid's words rang in her ears like a warning, a threat she could not escape. You're already involved. You can't leave. Not now. She looked at the child in the chamber again, the pale, fragile figure trapped inside, hooked up to the array of machines that kept it alive. Layla's mind swirled with confusion and dread. She had never imagined something so monstrous. Her pulse quickened, and her breath became shallow as the weight of the situation pressed down on her chest. The future she had dreamed of, the life she had hoped to build for her son, felt increasingly out of reach. This was not the escape she had imagined. This was a nightmare. Khalid stood across from her, calm, collected, and entirely unbothered by the storm of emotions raging within her. His demeanor hadn't changed, as if he were used to this kind of confrontation. As if he had seen it all before. But Layla wasn't about to let him manipulate her any longer. She wasn't going to let him control her, not after seeing the true nature of his plans. I won't be part of this, she said, her voice steady, though it shook with the force of her conviction. She could feel the words reverberating in the room, could see them land like blows, each one meant to sever the hold he had on her. I won't let you use me for this twisted experiment. Khalid's lips curved into a slight, almost imperceptible smile. His eyes glinted with something dark, something that sent a chill through Layla's veins. He wasn't surprised by her defiance. If anything, he seemed almost pleased by it, like he had been waiting for this moment. You think you can walk away from this? He asked, his voice quiet, almost mocking. You think you can just leave and pretend none of this ever happened? You're in this now, Layla. You're part of the plan. You can't just run away. Layla shook her head, her stomach turning with disgust. She had come to this place with the hope of finding a way to make a better life for her son. But now, she understood that this wasn't about her son, or about a better life. This was about Khalid's vision, a cold, calculated vision of survival that used people like pawns in a game. He didn't care about families or children. He cared only about his own agenda. I don't care what you think, she said, her voice rising. I won't be a part of this. I won't help you build your empire of lies. Khalid's expression darkened, his smile fading as he stepped closer to her. You don't have a choice, he said, his voice low and threatening. You're already too far in. And trust me, Layla, you don't want to find out what happens when you try to turn your back on me. Her heart pounded in her chest as she met his gaze, unflinching. She had come to realize that Khalid wasn't just a man who got what he wanted. He was a man who would do anything to maintain control, to get the future he desired, regardless of the cost. The lives he had already destroyed meant nothing to him. But Layla wasn't going to be one of those lives. She wasn't going to let him win. I will find a way out, she said firmly, though a part of her was terrified of what might happen if she tried. But there was no turning back now. She had to protect her son. She had to protect herself. Khalid's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Layla saw a flicker of something dangerous in his gaze. You think you can outsmart me? He asked, his voice laced with menace. I've built this empire from the ground up. I've spent years planning, preparing. And now, you're going to stand here and tell me you can walk away? You think you can just leave this all behind? No, Layla. You're mine now. And if you think you can escape me, you're wrong. The finality in his words sent a wave of panic through Layla. Her mind raced, thinking of her son, of the life she had promised him. What would Khalid do to her if she tried to leave? What would he do if she fought back? She knew he was capable of anything, and the thought made her stomach turn. But she couldn't give up. She wouldn't let him control her. She wouldn't let him destroy everything she had fought for. I'll find a way, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Her resolve was firming, even in the face of Khalid's threats. She couldn't afford to let him win. She couldn't afford to let him continue with his experiments, to continue using people like pawns in his twisted game. As the silence between them stretched, Layla's thoughts raced. She needed to act, and fast. She couldn't stay in this building. She couldn't stay under Khalid's thumb any longer. But how? How could she escape from this fortress? How could she protect her son from Khalid's influence? She glanced around the room, looking for any sign of weakness, any way out. The monitors and machines hummed softly, a constant reminder of the horrors that took place in this room. But they were just machines. And machines could be broken. She needed to find a way to disable them, to disrupt Khalid's control. If she could do that, maybe she could expose him, maybe she could bring his plans crashing down. But time was running out. She could feel the walls closing in around her, the weight of her situation pressing down on her. She needed to act quickly before it was too late. What if I told you that there's more to this than you think? Khalid said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was calm now, almost too calm. What if I told you that you're part of something much bigger than you ever imagined? Layla looked at him warily, unsure of what he was implying. What do you mean? She asked, her voice cautious. Khalid's gaze remained steady, unwavering. I mean that you're not just a pawn in my game, Layla. You're the key. You're the one who will make this work. Without you, none of this can come to fruition. The child in that chamber, the entire project, it all depends on you. Her heart skipped a beat, confusion clouding her mind. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Khalid's eyes darkened. "You're going to help me bring this to life. You're going to be the mother of the future. And once you've fulfilled your role, you'll have everything you've ever wanted. Everything will be yours." Layla recoiled, the words sinking in. She felt sick. This was not the future she had dreamed of. This was not the life she had wanted for herself or her son. This was a future built on lies, on manipulation, on the backs of people like her. "No," she said firmly. "I won't be part of your twisted vision. I won't help you create this future." Khalid's expression hardened, and the air in the room seemed to grow colder. He stepped closer to her, his eyes narrowing. "You don't have a choice," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're already in this, Layla. You're already too far gone. And if you think you can just walk away, you're wrong. There's no escaping this. You're mine." Layla's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. She had come too far to back down now. She had to find a way to fight back. She had to protect her son. She couldn't let Khalid win. She couldn't let him control her future. "I'll find a way out," she repeated, her voice stronger now, filled with determination. Khalid's eyes gleamed with an unsettling confidence. "We'll see about that," he said softly, almost as if he were amused. As the silence stretched between them, Layla knew one thing for certain: she had to escape. She had to stop Khalid's plans. And no matter what it took, she was willing to do whatever it took to protect her son and herself from the horrors that Khalid was trying to create. But escaping Khalid's grasp would not be easy. And she didn't know how much time she had left. The quiet hum of the machines was almost deafening in the cold, sterile room, as if the walls themselves were vibrating with the weight of the decisions that were yet to be made. Layla stood in front of the glass chamber, her eyes locked on the pale, motionless child inside. The child, a symbol of Khalid's twisted vision, lay in the center of the glass tank, surrounded by the array of wires and tubes that seemed to be keeping it alive. This was no ordinary child. This was a genetic experiment, a creation of Khalid's twisted obsession with survival, an attempt to control the future of humanity. Her heart ached at the sight of it. She had thought she was helping someone who wanted to be a father, someone who was seeking a better future for his child. But now, she saw the truth. There was no love in this. There was no family, no hope, no future. There was only power, and the desire to play God. Khalid stood by her side, watching her with those cold, calculating eyes, waiting for her to make her decision. Layla's mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts, swirling with fear, anger, and disbelief. The weight of the situation pressed down on her like a physical force, and she felt suffocated by the enormity of the choices she faced. She had come so far, made so many sacrifices, but now, she was at a crossroads. Her son's face flashed in her mind, and she clenched her fists, trying to push away the rising panic. She had made a promise to him, a promise that she would give him a better life, a life free from the pain and suffering she had endured. But could she really achieve that? Could she really build a better future for him, even if it meant walking away from everything she had worked for? "Layla," Khalid's voice cut through her thoughts, soft but firm. "You've seen the future. You've seen what's possible. This is the only way. The world is changing, and we have to adapt. If you help me, we can build a future for your son, a future where he can thrive, a future where he is safe." Layla's jaw tightened, her gaze still fixed on the child in the chamber. She had heard this before. The promises of a better world, the guarantees of a secure future, all of it was nothing more than a web of lies, spun by a man who was willing to sacrifice everything to build his vision of the future. She turned to face him, her expression hardening. "You don't care about a future, Khalid. You care about control. You care about creating a world where you're the one in charge, where you hold all the power." This isn't about survival. It's about domination. Khalid's eyes flickered with something, a hint of annoyance, perhaps, or frustration. But he quickly masked it, his expression returning to its usual calm, impenetrable facade. "You don't understand, Layla," he said, his voice colder now, more distant. "I've seen the world's future. It's crumbling. The earth is dying. The resources are running out. This is the only way to save humanity. And you are the key. Your son is the key. Together, we can build something that will last." "Last?" Layla repeated, her voice rising. "You're talking about creating a race of people, a race that's bred to survive your version of the future. You're playing God, Khalid, and I won't be part of it." The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with the tension between them. Khalid took a step closer to her, his eyes narrowing, his jaw tightening. "You've already made your choice, Layla. You've already agreed to be a part of this. Don't act like you have the luxury of turning back now." "I never agreed to this," she snapped. "I agreed to help a man who said he wanted to be a father. I agreed to have a child, to give my son a better future. But this is not what I signed up for." Khalid didn't respond immediately. He just stood there. His gaze fixed on her, as if he were calculating his next move. Layla could feel the weight of his scrutiny, and it made her uneasy. He wasn't just a man of power. He was a man who knew how to bend others to his will, how to manipulate them into doing what he wanted. And she could feel that control slipping from her grasp, as if she were caught in the grip of something far more powerful than her own will. But Layla wasn't going to give up. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let Khalid destroy everything she had fought for. She wasn't going to let him win. "I won't help you," she said again, her voice steady, unwavering. "I won't be a part of your experiment. I won't help you play God with people's lives." Khalid's face twisted with something, anger, perhaps, or frustration. For the first time, he seemed to lose his composure, his eyes flashing with something dangerous. "You think you have a choice," he hissed. "You think you can just walk away from all of this without consequences? You don't get to decide what happens here, Layla. I do." For a moment, Layla felt the weight of his words crash down on her. She had always been afraid of this, the consequences of defying Khalid. But she couldn't let that fear control her. She couldn't let it rule her decisions. She had to act. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. She had to think. She had to find a way to stop him, to expose what he was doing before it was too late. She couldn't let Khalid's vision of the future become a reality. She couldn't let him manipulate her, or anyone else, into building this twisted world he had created. "I won't be your pawn," Layla said, her voice soft but resolute. "I won't be part of this world you're trying to build." Khalid's expression darkened, his fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, Layla thought he might strike her, but instead, he took a step back, his face cold and unreadable. "Very well," he said quietly, his voice low and dangerous. "If you won't help me, then you'll have to leave." Layla blinked, startled by the sudden shift in his tone. "Leave?" What did he mean by that? Khalid turned his back on her, walking towards the door. "You've made your choice, Layla," he said, his voice carrying a note of finality. "But understand this, there is no going back. If you choose to walk away from this, there will be consequences. You and your son will never be safe again. You will be hunted. You will be nothing but a target." A chill ran through Layla as she watched him walk away. He wasn't bluffing. She knew that. But there was something else, a sense of finality in his words. It was clear that he was giving her one last chance to accept his offer, to be part of his vision of the future. But Layla knew now that she couldn't be a part of it. She couldn't live in the world Khalid was trying to create. She couldn't be the mother of the future that he wanted. With one last glance at the child in the chamber, Layla made her decision. She would walk away. She would take her son and leave this place, no matter the cost. She had to find a way to protect him, to protect herself, and to stop Khalid's twisted experiment from ever becoming a reality. She turned and walked towards the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to let Khalid control it. As she stepped into the hallway, the door closing behind her with a soft click, Layla took a deep breath. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a chance. A chance to build the future she had always dreamed of, a future free from fear, free from manipulation, and free from Khalid's twisted vision. The road ahead would be difficult, and she didn't know how it would end. But she knew this: she had made the right choice. And she would fight for it, no matter what. Wait for next ORT. Thank you.